Okay, so what we're going to be looking at now is the skill of forgetting. Now, forgetting is useful. Think of it like salt. If you use too much salt in cooking, it becomes inedible. Forgetfulness or using the skill of forgetting is a useful skill when used in small amounts in the right places. So let's kind of look into this and maybe just kind of flip your perception of forgetting on its head, but we'll also kind of unpack as to why forgetting happens and how we can prevent ourselves from forgetting the information that we don't want to forget. So this is where forgetting is going to be useful. What I encourage you to do is to forget everything that you think you already know about something. And they say the mind is like a parachute, that it only works when we're open. And so you want to be open-minded about learning new things, even about a topic that maybe you've already known before. One of the, I think it's the 5 most dangerous words to say to yourself is, I already know this. That's 4. The 4 most dangerous words. I already know this. And so what that does is it shuts down our perception to potentially learning some more. And I think that we can all achieve another level of mastery. Maybe we're going to hear the same topic that, even though we may have been trained in that topic for the last 10 years, there might be one little thing that we hear that's like, wow, I needed to hear that today. And I think anytime that we are presented with an opportunity to learn something new, that's the universe's way of saying, I know you know this, but how well are you doing it? And there's probably more to learn here. So it's useful to forget this idea that we already know something, just temporarily. It's good use to go, you know what, I'm just going to suspend all my prior learning and go into this assuming I know nothing about it. You also want to forget about all other distractions. So when you're learning something, you want to focus intently on the thing that you want to learn. It allows us to do what's known as deep work. Deep work is when you start to eliminate all other distractions and you start allowing your brain and its cognitive power to really unpack and delve deep into the one topic that you're looking at. Now, whether that be you're learning something or you're trying to create something, it's having that single-minded focus. It's that laser-like clarity to go, this is the thing I want to learn right now, and ignoring all other distractions from you. A lot of science is being conducted on productivity and multitasking. If you multitask, there's what's known as it's almost like an overlap of attention. There's like an attention sort of hangover, where as you move from one topic to another topic, it takes a while for you to kind of load up these new sort of mind programs. So for example, if you're doing maths, and this is the challenge for that we put kids through when they go through the traditional school model, is we give them, say, 40 minutes to learn maths, and then the bell rings and they walk off and they go into art class, and they have to kind of load up new set of skills to now go from logical based brain to now creative based brain. And it takes time. It takes time for us to kind of get back into the flow of things. Whereas again, the studies have shown that you want to look at either from sort of 45 minutes to 3 hour, those sorts of blocks allow you to do some really deep work. And that's when you get into this cognitive flow and you are able to really tap into your intuition and pull out your best work. And so you want to try to forget about other distractions. You want to also forget about all the limitations that you think you have. Now, it can be as simple as just going, let's pretend. And sometimes this is a bit of a challenge for people, like, no, but I really have these limitations. We think that our problems are real. We think that our problems are concrete. We think that they are tangible. We feel like they are factual. And so we have to suspend our current way of thinking temporarily. Go, let's just pretend. It's a really good way when you're working with clients that are a bit resistant. You go, okay, look, I know you've got all these problems and I know you've got these challenges. I know you've got these limitations. Let's just pretend for a moment. And so that gets people into a temporary, more resourceful state. And if we can be temporarily more resourceful, now we've just opened up the doorway of being more resourceful longer as well. So just temporarily, let's just forget about our limitations that we think we have. And often we have trained ourselves to believe in these limitations. Again, these labels that we may have of ourselves, I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that, I always get this wrong, I'm not a numbers person, I'm not a creative person, I'm not this sort of person. We have all these limitations and these labels and these stories and these experiences from our past that we then generalize and say, well, that dictates my future. And so we want to suspend all of that, forget all about that temporarily to discover more of who we can become. It kind of sets us free from the shackles that we have created for ourselves through our own self-imposed limitations. You know, when I say they're self-imposed, it's because, yes, they may have been given to us from other people. You may have gotten it through your upbringing, through your past experiences, but it is us ultimately that choose to keep those shackles on us, on ourselves. We choose to keep telling ourselves these stories. And so what I'm suggesting is let's just temporarily, hopefully long term, but just temporarily for now, if you're not quite ready for the long term, temporarily forget about those limitations and let's just see what else you're truly capable of. You also then want to forget the detail, but remember the principles. And this is where forgetting is useful. And if you're going to read a book, let's imagine, let's see if I can find a really thick book here. Let's do 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So, you know, it's a decent sized book. Let's see, it's got 370 pages. That's more on the sort of the higher end for a lot of sort of personal growth books. It's typically around sort of 280, 250, somewhere around there. Now there's a lot of information in that, I assume, from 370 pages. I've read it years ago. It's been a while since I've read it. There is a lot of information in there. So how do you remember 370 pages of detail? You can't. Well, most people can't anyway. One of my past students is actually has been training for about 18 months now for a memory world record. He gets 61 packs of cards he needs to remember, and he's well on his way to getting there. So look, for most people, we can't do that. He can memorize most of the dictionary. So that's kind of like people that are a bit on the outliers. Most of us, we can't do that. I can't do that. What we need to do though is forget the detail, but remember the principles. We don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the cognitive power or the skill just yet to remember the detail, nor do we really need to. What we do need to remember are the principles. And so when you remember the principles and the structure, that's all you need to keep in your mind. Okay, structure, not detail. When we talk about, and we will go into this when we get into some of the NLP side of things and the transformational side, is we talk about structure versus content. Structure versus content, just to pre-teach it a little bit here, is that everyone's got content. Everyone's had individual things that have happened. My life has never happened to anyone else because my life is my life. Your life has happened to you and no one else has lived the content of your life. So my life content is completely unique to me. There are, there's like 3.5 billion people out there, maybe 4 billion. There's 3.5 billion individual life stories that are out there right now, and no one's is the same as anybody else's. That's the content. But the structure is very much similar. We all have negative emotions. We all have positive emotions. We all have things that have happened to us in the past, and some of us carry that stuff with us. So when you think about structure, it makes things easier. We don't need to get caught up into content when we stay at the structural level. The same thing when you read a book. When you read a book, you don't need to remember the detail. You just need to remember the structure, the principles. When you're going through this program, you don't need to remember the detail. You need to remember the principles. It's the principles that will stick in our head, that becomes a sticky idea. Now, there's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, and there's been studies to show that over time, our ability to remember things decreases. And so it's useful to understand how this works, because we can then create a strategy or a solution to that is going to put the odds in our favor of us remembering the most useful information that we choose to remember. And it's not just about learning it once and going, I hope that works. I hope it sticks in there, as you'll soon see. So here's the forgetting curve. Now, what you can see here is this starts off, let's imagine you learned something today and you don't typically remember 100% of what you just learned. You probably learn about sort of 90%, somewhere around there. You still lose a little bit. And so let's say you're at that peak of remembering what you've just learned right now. But then if you wait a day, you're down to probably about what, sort of 50%. So you've actually forgotten about 50% of whatever you learned the previous day. And then if you wait another day, well, you're down to probably about sort of 30%. If you wait another day, you're down to close to 20%. And then by the end of the week, you're probably down to about 10 or 15%. You remember probably about 10% of whatever you learned the previous week. Now, hopefully that 10% are the principles, and it'd be the things that stick out to you, that are kind of the sticky ideas that you've heard. Now, this is where some trainers or even people that write books don't quite understand how to make ideas stick. Now, let's imagine you just read that one book, or you go to that course, go back, and you don't relearn it. Well, then a week later, and it does kind of, almost like even out to a point where you'll just remember that 10%, and it does slowly decline, but that's when you've seen the major decline a week later. You remember the 10%. What you probably want to do though is remember the 20% that gets the 80% result. It may not be the case though. You might be remembering some non-essential information that just stood out to you. And that's where the skill of the trainer or the author or the person delivering the information also needs to ensure that they're able to deliver it in a sticky way as well, so it sticks in your head, or at least help you identify, look, these are the essential things to remember. Everything else is just kind of the detail, the context to it. But what you can do is within a day, so 24 hours later, if you do a rapid recap. So you might have spent 3 hours learning something, and then 24 hours later, you spend 7 minutes or 10 minutes relearning something. So you just quickly go through. Now, if it took you 3 hours to learn it here, when you get to this point here, well, you can't invest 3 hours again, or you could, but you don't need to. You recap the principles. And so all of a sudden you remember all the most important principles, all the most important structure of the information you're receiving. And then you wait 3 days, so 2 days later, which is a total of 3 days from when you first learned it, and you recap again for, again, probably about 7 minutes or so. Rapid recap, hence rapid 7 minutes recap. You recap what you just learned, and you reinstall the information into your neurology again. It reminds you of it. Okay, that's right. So you've now just invested, let's say 10 minutes here, 7 minutes here, a total of 17 minutes, and you've just ensured that you are improving the retention of that information. Now, retention is just the first important step. The second important step is application. Let's just stay with retention for now. And then you wait another 3 days later, which is now a total of 6 days from when you started, and you do a rapid recap. And you might do another 7 minutes. And so you keep doing this. Now, after 6 days, what you would then do is do 2 weeks. Now, it's obviously off the chart here. But let me show you this table here. So you can see you've got 24 hours. 24 hours later, you recap it for 10 minutes. 3 days later, from the start of when you learned it, 7 minutes. 6 days later, 7 minutes. 2 weeks, 5 minutes. 1 month later, 5 minutes. 3 months later, 3 minutes. 6 months later, 3 minutes. 12 months later, 3 minutes. After a full year of review, you have invested 43 minutes, just a total of 43 minutes, in ensuring that you have retained and you know that content very well. Now, I shared with you these 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I did not do it with this book. I read this book many years ago before I even learned about this stuff, and I haven't gone back to do it. However, some other books that I have done it for, which if I can find some, Hooked is an example one. So I have mind mapped this book, and this book is in my review process. I have other books which I can share with you. It's another one I have here. Obviously, Awesome is another book that I have mind mapped, and I go through this process. And so the books that I read, I'm like, this is the stuff that I definitely need to learn. I definitely need to install into my unconscious mind. I want to remember this stuff because it's so useful. I put them into this process. And so I'm continually reviewing certain books. Now, I'm not perfect at it, and you don't have to be perfect at it. That's the great thing about this. You do not have to be perfect. But I can tell you, even if you skip 1 or 2, you are doing more than what most people are doing. And therefore, you have put the odds in your favor of you learning faster, remembering this information, and therefore giving yourself the best opportunity, the best foundation to take action based on that information. And so I want to share with you, really quickly how powerful forgetting can be, but also how to inoculate yourself from forgetting important information that you want to remember. So let's have a look at what we call the superpower tasks. Why do I call it superpower tasks? It's because the superpower is in the application. Retention of information is one step. Let's move it into application, because learning is not a passive activity. It's an engaging activity. And so let's engage ourselves here. What I encourage you to do is get a pen, get some paper. In fact, get a exercise book and make this your Neuro Quantum Conditioning workbook. Just pen and paper, that's all you need. I encourage you to get a 4-color pen like this. So you got 4 colors. And I want you, step 1 is to write down, my mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And let's just kind of install that into ourselves. Let's write it down. You'll soon find out why writing things down is better than typing. So for now, let's just write it down. Number 2, write down your most prevalent, your most dominant distraction, and what you'll do to avoid it from distracting you often. So is it social media? Is it your TV? Is it computer games? Is it apps? Is it something else? So what are the things that you find yourself kind of gravitating to and getting distracted by that takes you out of kind of moving the needle forward in your life? Studies have been done that have shown that the average emotion that people walk away from after watching TV or using social media is mild depression. So when we use TV and social media, it makes us feel good in the moment, but at the end, we all sort of realize, you know what, I kind of just wasted my time. Like I just let time pass by. And so on average, most people walk away from those experiences with a feeling of mild depression. Now, number 3, write down a limiting belief that you think you have about yourself that might make learning more challenging for you. What's a limiting belief? Let's kind of dig in there and go, okay, what's a limiting belief that you have about your own ability to learn? Do you feel like, oh, I'm not a numbers person, I'm not very good at writing things down, learning's hard, I'm not very good at learning, can't teach an old dog new tricks, I find it difficult to concentrate, I have ADHD, I have a learning disability, I have dyslexia. What are the limiting beliefs? Just one for now. What's a limiting belief that you feel like you have? And I want you to write it down, but then I want you to change it and go, what would you like that belief to be instead? So imagine you had that magic wand. Let's say this is a magic pen. Whatever you write down is actually going to change your energetic signature. Again, we'll get into that later on, but just trust it for now that by writing it down as to what you'd like it to be instead, puts the odds in favor and uses the science in your favor that it will likely happen. So write down what you'd like that belief to be instead. Now, keep it positive though. So don't say, well, I have ADHD, and what would I like to be instead? I don't have ADHD, because what are you still focusing on? ADHD. Say it the way you want it to be. So instead of it being, I have ADHD, you might say, I am very good at concentrating. See how we then focus on what we want rather than what we don't want. And then the 4th one is set in your calendar. So get your phone out, whatever you use as a calendar. If you don't use a calendar, just put it in your phone anyway. Put in a reminder that will pop up on your phone. It will distract you, but we're using this strategically. Distract yourself strategically in 24 hours to review everything you've just learned about forgetting. Just to go through your superpower tasks, just to kind of refine yourself. Okay, this is what I just learned about forgetting. It's not going to take 10 minutes. It'll probably take 3 minutes. Again, you don't spend 10 minutes on the content. If it only took 10 minutes to cover it, you probably spend, probably 10% of that time. So maybe even a minute. Just refresh your memory on what you just learned and start the process. And I'll see you on the next video.